Ever catch yourself wondering how the things we learn in school shape, like an entire generation?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, except we're going all the way to Russia.
Okay.
We're talking about Russian education and trying to figure out just how deep this patriotic, and let's be real, some might even say propagandistic, education really goes.
Right, right.
And to help us unpack all of this, we have this incredible interview with Ivan Anchev. He's an expert in international security and diplomacy.
Okay.
He gives us this, like, masterclass in how history can be used as a tool and what it means for Russia, like, right now.
And that's what I find so fascinating and concerning, honestly. Russia, they've always had this kind of like intertwined relationship with education and control. This isn't some new phenomenon we're talking about. It's literally centuries of using their education system to push certain narratives.
Oh, really?
And let's be frank, control the population.
It's like baked into the system. And that's exactly what Anchev is saying, too. He argues that because Russia hasn't had that foundation, that bedrock of democracy that, say, Western societies have, it creates this need, this constant need for an outside enemy to rally against.
Exactly. And that need, unfortunately, just feeds the cycle, right? You have to have an enemy, so militarism becomes a core part of their identity as a nation. It's a dangerous game they're playing.
It is. And it makes you think about those images you see coming out of Russia. Kindergarteners in military uniforms, tanks instead of toys in their hands. And that Z symbol, like plastered everywhere, it's chilling.
It's unsettling, for sure. And it's easy to think, oh, this is just Russia, but sadly, it's not. This whole using education for propaganda thing, it's a global issue, especially when it comes to molding young minds. Look at conflict zones. Palestine, for instance.
Right.
Anti-Israel sentiment, a lot of times it's instilled in kids from a really young age.
Which is heartbreaking when you really think about it. I mean, the Anchev actually tells this story in the interview. One of his friends, a Palestinian man, he was horrified because his 4-year-old daughter came home from kindergarten singing an anti-Israel song.
Wow.
It's like these narratives take root so early before kids even have the ability to question what they're being told.
Absolutely. And the people in power know that, and they exploit that.
Which brings us to one of the, honestly, more concerning things Anchev talks about in this interview. The Foundations of Security and Defense of the Fatherland program.
Okay.
Essentially, this is a curriculum for 15 to 18-year-olds, and it includes weapons training. And we're not talking theory here. Anchev makes it very clear that this is hands-on, practical preparation for conflict.
And what's even more alarming is that this whole program, it wasn't announced publicly. It was actually leaked by British intelligence.
Oh, wow.
Almost like they wanted to keep it under wraps.
So shady.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't enough, there's this other program, the Parnagroya program. Basically, it translates to Heroes Desk. They dedicate desks in schools to these quote-unquote heroes, which, okay, whatever.
Right.
But these heroes they're choosing, they include figures from the Ukraine conflict. They even encourage students to study Daria Dugina, you know, the pro-war propagandist who was killed in 2022. Like, what message does that send to young people?
It's blurring the lines, right, between what it means to be patriotic and what's just straight up dangerous and unquestioning ideology.
Totally. And it's giving me serious dystopian novel vibes over here.
I get it.
It's like, are we seeing history repeat itself? Anchev even draws a parallel between these tactics and things that were used during the Soviet era.
Oh, absolutely. You see it with the resurgence of these pioneer organizations. There were these youth groups during the Soviet era, and they were all about instilling communist ideology. And then there's the glorification of these partisan fighters. And even the way they disseminate information through specific groups, like the Georgy Kirchhoff Society, which was responsible for, well, spreading Soviet propaganda abroad. Now, these might seem like relics of the past, but they show us how easy it is to manipulate these seemingly benign institutions, to use them for propaganda, I mean. And it's not just about bringing back old tactics, it's about, like, remixing them for a new generation.
Totally.
Anchev talks about this Putin decree from May 2024. It basically dictates how Russian history has to be taught in schools now.
Wow. It's like they're taking the old playbook, right?
Yeah.
Dusting it off, giving it a fresh coat of paint and being like, look, brand new.
Exactly. And this decree, this attempt to control what people are hearing, it's not just about textbooks, is it? It goes way beyond that.
So it impacts.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Think about it. This decree, it affects everything. Video game content. It even tries to control how they respond to what the Kremlin calls information attacks from the West.
Information attacks. Okay,
Yeah.
so what are those exactly? Can you give us some concrete examples?
Basically, anything that challenges the official narrative coming from the Kremlin. So, if you question their whole thing about the Ukraine conflict, that's an information attack. Or if you start highlighting all those human rights abuses that are being reported inside Russia, that's a problem for them.
Wow.
Even just like presenting different viewpoints on historical events, things that maybe don't line up perfectly with what they're saying.
So they're really trying to shut down any dissent, like any form of independent thought.
Exactly. It's all about control.
And the way they're controlling the narrative around World War II, it's pretty alarming. Anchev says that even questioning the Soviet Union's leading role in World War II, that can land you in legal trouble, like actually criminal prosecution.
It's wild, isn't it? It's like they're literally trying to rewrite history, and they're silencing anyone who dares to question their version of events.
It's scary, honestly. Like, what does this even mean for academic freedom, for journalism, for just having an open dialogue about anything?
It's a chilling effect, for sure. And it's not just happening in a vacuum. This is Russia, right? A major player on the world stage.
That's what I keep coming back to, is like, okay, this is a bleak picture for what's happening inside Russia. But what about the ripple effects? What does it mean for everyone else?
Exactly.
What's the end game here with this whole culture of militarized patriotism?
Power. Plain and simple. Russia wants to be a dominant force globally. And this whole meticulously crafted education system, it's a tool, a way to get there.
You're saying they're creating a generation that's primed for conflict.
In a way, yeah. This system, it breeds this unquestioning obedience to the state and this deep suspicion of anyone outside of Russia. It's us versus them, plain and simple.
And we know where that leads. History has shown us time and time again.
Exactly. And that's why understanding how these narratives are built, how they spread, it's crucial. It's about empowering ourselves to be critical thinkers.
To really examine the information we're consuming.
Yeah.
Right, no matter where it's coming from.
Exactly.
It's a lot to think about. Anchev definitely leaves us with a lot to unpack here. He asks, like, what happens when a society can no longer question its past? Or even, like, critically examine its present?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Because the truth is, we're all susceptible to manipulation, to some degree.
It's true.
The only way to combat that, to protect ourselves, is to stay informed, to expose ourselves to diverse viewpoints, and maybe most importantly, never stop asking questions.
Love that. It's like we're in this web of information, just bombarded constantly with all these different sides and different narratives. It's like, how do you even untangle it all? Where do you even begin to figure out what's true?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what Anchev is saying, it really highlights how easily we can get caught up in these narratives, especially these days when information spreads so fast.
Yeah, and it's like, is it even possible to win? But you're right, recognizing it, that's got to be the first step, right? And this deep dive we've done into Russia's education system, it's eye-opening for sure.
Definitely.
To see how a government can just systemically, I don't know, mold how an entire generation sees the world just through education. It's a lot.
It is. And it reminds us, that education, it can be used for good, but it can also be a tool for something much darker.
Right.
Like a wake-up call, honestly, for all of us. To really examine the narratives we're being fed in our own countries, globally, it doesn't matter.
So, like, what do we do? How do we take what Anchev is saying, all these insights, and actually apply them to our own lives? How do we become, like, smarter about the information we're consuming?
Well, it starts with thinking critically, right? Diversify where you're getting your information from. Listen to different perspectives, even if you don't agree with them. And be open to having those conversations, even when it's tough.
And what about our own biases?
Oh, huge.
Like, we all have them, these preconceived notions and experiences that shape how we see things.
You're totally right. And being able to recognize your own biases, that's key to thinking critically. It's about being willing to say, okay, maybe I don't have it all figured out, and being open to having your perspective challenged.
It's a journey, for sure. Well, this has been a fascinating, honestly pretty intense deep dive into Russian education. And honestly, it feels like we've uncovered more questions than answers.
It always does, doesn't it?
It always does.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe that's a good thing. It means we're starting to peel back the layers and really wrestle with this stuff. And for anyone listening, if you want to go deeper, highly recommend checking out this interview with Ivan Anchev. You can find the link on our website.
It's worth a listen.
It is. It really makes you think about the power of education and what's at stake. All right, everyone. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on the flip side.